Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this final evening of the conference, Jesus and the Pharisees. Welcome also to those who are following by live streaming. Everything has been on live streaming, and this evening again. This evening will be a bit special in the sense that we're going to have simultaneous translation. Since this is the final evening, it's also an evening that was more publicized. We may have people here who have joined us, so I'll just say a few words about the conference. Why Jesus and the Pharisees? Don't worry, for those who've been following the conference, I'm not going to give a synthesis of everything, but just a few words to say the main reason why we're taking this theme, we took this theme, is because we realize that in the past decades there's been a big evolution in our understanding of what Pharisees are and what Pharisees mean. If you look at even contemporary dictionaries, not theological dictionaries, but a normal English dictionary, under Pharisee, you would always find something, or most of the time find something like a Jewish sect characterized by extreme legalism, attention to details, attention to an exterior form of religiosity, pride. Pride comes up. I checked a few definitions. Pride comes up quite often. And the second definition is the moral value of hypocrisy. So it's Pharisees are hypocrites, and this has a big impact not only there's not only the problem that it's simply not true, there's also the impact on the way Christians or more generally speaking, people can understand Jews and perceive Jews. And sometimes there's a sort of collapsing where we collapse hypocrites, Pharisees, Jews, and we have this the ground for many forms of anti-Semitism. This afternoon was particularly powerful in this sense, where we saw to what extent this was true in theater, in films, in textbooks, so what's available for the general public. On the other hand, in the past 3 days, what we've learned, confirmed, put together from different fields is the fact that actually more than legalistic, Pharisees were probably more lenient, especially in what concerns punishment. Also, they took in consideration the human aspect. They were very popular. In the Jewish tradition, very often they're considered holy. So there's always this. I heard at least one person here say, for me it's a badge of honor to be a Pharisee or to be a descendant of Pharisees, which Paul also said. So we have this shift. We have also the shift that we basically know we don't know as much as we thought we knew, and that the situation is much more complex, and that maybe the term Pharisee does not correspond to one single group or to a unified group, or maybe not even to a group. Maybe it's more of a religious system. And then as far as the relation between Jesus and the Pharisees, or the Pharisees and Jesus is concerned, just in one sentence, they were not Jesus's main enemies and not even enemies, and Jesus was not a Pharisee. So somewhere in between, you discussed the Pharisees with the Pharisees, used a lot of Pharisaic material, but he also had it had influence from different quarters. So, as this is the final evening, and we're happy to have special guests with us, we'll have a few salutations before handing the floor to the main speakers. First of all, I'm very happy to hand the floor to Father Gonsalves, who is the rector of the Gregorian University. This here is the Pontifical Gregorian University. Maybe I can just say one word. I forgot to say, I am Etienne Veteux, and I'm the director of the Cardinal Bea Center of this university. So, Father Gonsalves, please.
I will speak in Italian.
Dear Father Rector of the Pontifical Biblical Institute, dear speakers, professors, students, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor as Rector of the Pontifical Gregorian University to be able to address you a short greeting at this final session of the conference on Jesus and the Pharisees, a interdisciplinary re-examination. This is a conference which was conceived and organized by the Pontifical Biblical Institute with the cooperation of the Cardinal Bea Center for Judaic Studies at the Gregorian University. This conference is held on the occasion of the 110th anniversary of the Pontifical Biblical Institute. The Biblical Institute, therefore, has my sincere best wishes for this celebration. These best wishes are, first of all, a recognition and a word of thanks for the fundamental contribution of thoroughness and excellency which the Pontifical Biblical Institute has provided and continues to provide to studies on the Holy Scriptures. The Cardinal Bea Center for Judaic Studies is also celebrating an important anniversary this year, the 50th anniversary of the death of its patron, who we have remembered with a series of important conferences. I believe that the spirit of Cardinal Agostino Bea, the Cardinal of Unity, has been very much present in these 3 days of exchange and study on Jesus and the Pharisees. The cooperation of the Gregorian University with this conference promoted by the Pontifical Biblical Institute is a sign of the cooperation between the two institutions, and a sign that this will grow and become deeper in time. The main beneficiaries will be the professors and the students of the two academic institutions. For it is striking to recall that here, on Piazza della Pilota, between the Biblical and the Gregorian University, around 550 students, undergraduates and PhD students from all over the world are giving the best of themselves in the study of the Holy Scriptures. As Father Etienne Veteux, Director of the Cardinal Bea Center for Judaic Studies, has indicated in the press conference presenting the event, this international conference is a sign of the new understanding Catholic Church has of Judaism, and is a measure in which Jews and Christians can together study their common history. These are words which repeat what the Vatican Council II stated in the historic Nostra Aetate Declaration at number 1. Since the spiritual heritage common to Christians and Jews is so great, this Holy Council wishes to promote and recommend mutual knowledge and esteem, which can be achieved particularly through biblical and theological studies and a fraternal dialogue. This is what was written at the Vatican Council II. A meeting today with Pope Francis once again confirms these words of the Council and really make them topical. As the Holy Father wrote in the message he gave us this morning, in order to better love our neighbors, we need to know them, and in order to know who they are, often we need to find a way to overcome ancient prejudice. And speaking of our conference, the Holy Father stated, your conference, which connects faiths and disciplines in its intention to arrive at a more mature understanding and a more accurate understanding of Pharisees will allow us to present them more appropriately in teaching and in preaching. I am sure Pope Francis goes on to state that these studies and the new paths which will be open will contribute positively to relations between Jews and Christians with a view to a more thorough and fraternal dialogue. The topic of Jesus and the Pharisees is part of the common history for Jews in history. It's a history which has had its lights and its shadows. Studying Jesus and the Pharisees in a context like ours, where we re-examine the question with an interdisciplinary approach, means that we want to go beyond a partial understanding and that we commit ourselves to overcome prejudices and stereotypes. This is something which we've done throughout our conference, and the two final presentations, I'm sure, will further help us to travel in this direction. Preaching the Pharisees and the other presentation, Which Future for the Pharisees. And it is this future which opens before us and which you have all helped us to glimpse. My heartfelt thanks for having done that.
Thank you, Father Rector, for these kind words and also for welcoming the conference here, because at the beginning it was supposed to be at the Biblicum. It was mainly organized by the Biblicum, but then there was so much success that we had to find a bigger room, and this is the bigger room. It's a great pleasure and an honor to have with us Rabbi Dizeni, who's the chief rabbi of Rome. Please, Rabbi Dizeni.
Now you'll ask what this has to do with anything. Dramatic photograph of a bride and groom getting arrested by the police. Thank you very much for this invitation. I was told to speak 5 minutes, and I asked myself, how can one in 5 minutes launch a message which is not trite, or at least to try to launch a trite message in a way which isn't trite. So I said to myself, I would like to send out a take-home message with 4 very simple words, but if I say them straight away, they wouldn't have any impact. So you've been working here for 3 days. I would like to suggest 1 minute of relax with a small game. This is a very serious place. It's a very serious conference. You're very serious people. But my game is quite serious in a way, because it is a riddle. You know that the language of the prophets is a riddle. And I'd like to ask some patience to those who don't speak Italian, but this is something which you'll be guided along on a word-by-word basis, because we transform this into a word game, a word riddle. It's very difficult, even for those who know Italian. This is something which was produced by Tenaviv. Actually, his name is Vivanet. You read it the other way round. And he was someone who developed crosswords and riddles, and he was from Sardinia. So I was thinking, this is something which is typical of Samuel Yelzut Lazar in Cagliari. This poet who wrote incomprehensible things came from Cagliari. So let's try and solve this rebus. It's a difficult one, and I'll guide you. Well, I don't know if anybody has solved this yet. In our common society, when a person is arrested, we say he's not guilty until the final sentence. When in these games, we say a person who is arrested is very guilty. So guilty is a long word in Italian, and we use the word reo. Reo. If there are two of them, it's rei. That's the plural. R-E-O and R-E-I. So we have G-B and R-E-I. Now, the most difficult thing is to understand where to place them. It's a very short solution because they are sposo and sposa, spouse, and husband won't work. They're husband and wife. How can we put this in? And the solution is G, the man, and his wife, B, are guilty, rei, R-E-I, so it becomes G and his wife, B, R-E-I. Now if we solve this according to that, it's Gesù amò gli ebrei. Jesus loved the Jews. Well, that was the original drawing. I thought you might have asked me to leave after that, but no, you're letting me stay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Dizen. You were really able in 5 minutes to say something that we'll remember probably all our life. It's also a great pleasure to have with us Don Giuliano Savina, who represents the Bishops' Conference. He's the Secretary of the Italian Bishops' Conference Commission for Ecumenism and Dialogue.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's the first time I've been here in my life, so I'm very excited and very happy. I'm bringing you the greeting of Bishop Ambrogio Sperafico. His Excellency is the President for the Italian Bishops' Conference's Commission for Ecumenism and Dialogue. He was supposed to be here today, but he's unable to be here, and I will read his message now. I am sorry not to be here at the moment, but unfortunately unexpected developments make it impossible to be here. So I'd like to ask Father Giuliano to read some comments which I'd already read, and Mr. Father Giuliano will be adding a personal greeting. Not having heard you, I can only congratulate you on the program and the aim of this conference to reread the relationship between Jesus and the Pharisees. I suppose also to add an important part of that process, the Catholic Church began particularly from the Council in rereading the text of the New Testament, not in an anti-Jewish sense, so as not to contribute to the anti-Semitism which has been so nefarious for Jews over the centuries. The conference could not be held in a more suitable place than this prestigious university, which has done so much together with the Biblical Institute to promote a reading of the Bible in the spirit of Vatican II. It's clear that the texts of the New Testament, which the Pharisees, often associated with the scribes, so much of the time they're identified, are to be read in the context, as was demonstrated by the document of the Pontifical Biblical Commission, the Jewish people and its Holy Scriptures in the Christian Bible, by Cardinal Ratzinger. And we read the comment that Jews are spoken of in Matthew, invectives and accusations against the scribes and the Pharisees are equal to, similar to those found in the prophets, which correspond to the literary genre of the age, used in the Jewish environment, for example in Qumran, and in the Hellenistic environment. They are, furthermore, as in the prophets, one aspect of a call to conversion. Read in the Christian communities, they warn the Christians themselves against attitudes which are incompatible with the gospel. Furthermore, the anti-Pharisaic virulence of Matthew 23 is to be seen in the context of the apocalyptic discourse of Matthew 24:25. The apocalyptic language is used in a time of persecution in order to strengthen the resistance of the persecuted minority and strengthen its hope in a divine intervention of liberation. I believe that these words move us in the right direction and allow us to deal with the issue of the relationship between Jesus and the Pharisees in the right way, as I'm sure you've done over the last few days. In any case, this analysis allows us to understand we need to have in mind a rereading proposed as an invitation to understand it and to practice it, so as to avoid, particularly in catechesis and preaching, I hope not in theology, though I can't be totally sure of it, the New Testament interpretations which still risk insinuating, if not bolstering, an anti-Jewish reading of the texts, and therefore promoting the distance from the Jewish communities which live among us, the relation with whom, on the other hand, could enrich our own understanding of the Christian Bible. So much still has to be done in this direction. The well-known, although perhaps only to specialists and scholars of Judaism, notes for the correct presentation of Jews and Judaism in preaching and catechism in the Catholic Church of 1985 have remained limited to specific circles which have made this a reference point, but these have not yet become the common heritage of our Church, at least in Italy. Because of this, in our committee at the Bishops' Conference, our Committee for Ecumenism and Interreligious Dialogue, we're looking into the possibility of redistributing this knowledge of Judaism and the relationship between Christians and Jews in a common enterprise with the Union of Jewish Communities in Italy and the Jewish Community of Rome through national conferences and specialized notes which are addressed in particularly to teachers of the Catholic religion and catechists and pastoral workers. I'm sure that mutual knowledge and communication will allow us Christians also to read the Christian Bible in a new way, enlightened by the Spirit, which always speaks to the Church to bring peoples and faiths close together, starting from the intrinsic special relationship we have with Judaism. So there's just one thing I'd like to show you. Let's see whether we can do that, and then I'll conclude.
Si parlava del rapporto.
Speaking of the relationship between the UCI and the CEI, and this produced this meeting, Judaism and Christianity in the schools. This is something we'll be holding here in Rome. We're sending out the registration forms, and you can see that the Union of Italian Jewish Communities and our office of the Bishops' Conference, together with National Office for Schools and Universities and National Service for Catholic Teaching, are promoting a meeting for teachers and trainers on the presentation of Judaism and Christianity in school teaching. It is increasingly necessary in the contemporary situation for correct presentation of the basic elements of Christianity and Judaism in order to combat some of the prejudices which have often affected the history of today. So what you're doing over these days is something which we're trying to undertake in our Italy.
Thank you so much for having come to this final part of the conference, and you will thank Bishop Sperfico for his encouraging words and for having explained very concretely what you are doing to promote Jewish-Christian relations. A last word of salutation by Father Alan Fogarty, who is the president of the Gregorian University Foundation. I imagine Father Fogarty will explain what the Gregorian University Foundation is. Okay.
Good evening. As I stand here before you and have been here for the last 3 days, I think of Joseph Sievers and say thank you very much for everything. The collaboration from everyone here in the room, whether you're presenters or attending, and those who are home in their rooms, beaming in through the internet. It's just been an incredible experience. The 3 words that come to mind as I stand here as the president of the Gregorian University Foundation are collaboration, as I just referred to, transformation, and the future. So the collaboration has been enormous. It has been around the world. It is not just between the Bea Center, the Gregorian University, the Biblicum. It has been on so many fronts. That is an amazing thing. We should never take it for granted, and it is certainly a lot of work to put together, but certainly well worth it. The transformation, we realize that so many conversations have to take place around the theme of Jesus and the Pharisees. That is very clear from Philip Cunningham's presentation here at this afternoon, and many, many others, of course, without mentioning everyone. It's impossible to do, but you see where the need is there. And then the future. So Craig Morrison spoke, just briefly pointed out to Dr. Cunningham that the future scholars are seated here or on their computers, and they're listening to what changes need to take place, what transformations have to take place. They are coming from around the world. So why am I standing here greeting you as the president of the Gregorian University Foundation? So I live in Washington, D.C. and travel back and forth between there and here quite often. And what I do is I raise money for the Gregorian, the Biblicum, and the Orientale. So the reason I'm here is to encourage you to think about what happened in this conference. Whether it's, maybe we need another one called the Sadducees, Jesus and the Sadducees, or if it's some other theme. There are many other themes that need to be explored. This is an amazing place for it to happen at the Gregorian, collaboration with the Biblicum, the Bea Center for Judaic Studies. What I'm doing is pleading to everyone in the room, whether you can possibly donate to the works that we're doing, because they do not happen out of nothing. If you can't do it, maybe you know someone who can, and now you know me. And if you don't know me, you know them, and they know me. So, I welcome you to be in touch with me so that the future is guaranteed. Thank you for everything.